Hello, everyone, and welcome to the launch of Creativity at Work, Interdisciplinary Learning in Industry and Community Settings, a research report produced by Queensland University of Technology and the Australia Council for the Arts. I'm Kristen Cornell, Research Fellow and Manager of Research Partnerships at the Australia Council for the Arts. I'd like to begin by warmly acknowledging the traditional owners of the land from which I'm coming to you today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And I'd also like to acknowledge the many nations throughout Australia that we're gathering from and pay my respects to elders past, present and future, and to all First Nations peoples present and online in this session today. So today we'll be hearing from the QUT academics who worked with the Australia Council on this report and who were critical in the design of the program that the report studies. I'll speak later on about some of the findings of the research. We're also joined today by Adrian Collette, CEO of the Australia Council, and Distinguished Emeritus Professor Stuart Cunningham from QUT, who will be introducing the discussion in a sec. But before I hand over to our speakers, just some quick housekeeping. I'm sure you're familiar with this by now, but if you have a question, please use the Q&A channel, and we'll try to answer as many of these as we can. Feel free to start sending those questions through at any time. We've saved some time at the end, however, to respond. The chat function is also available throughout the session. I think some people have started using it. And we invite and encourage you to share your thoughts and ideas with each other and to use that channel for general discussion. I'd like to thank Alyssa Blakeney and Bettina Girdler for joining us today as Auslan interpreters. And thanks also to Diego and Lena from the Australia Council, who will be behind the scenes looking after the chat and Q&A channels for us. And now I'd like to hand over to Adrian Collette, CEO of the Australia Council. Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you, Kristen, and welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm speaking to you from the lands of the Wurundjeri and Boonwurrung peoples of the Eastern Kulin Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and to all First Nations people who are joining us today. It's my very great pleasure to be launching Creativity at Work, Interdisciplinary Learning in Industry and Community Settings. This report is the result of a 2-year research partnership between the Australia Council and the Queensland University of Technology. The decision to team up on this project was driven by a number of interests that are currently shared across the arts and university sectors. Most critically, these include the need to address the role that creativity, critical thinking and lifelong learning will play in the workplaces and social contexts of the future. We know that Australian arts and creativity are emerging amongst our most powerful assets. Investment in arts and creativity has cultivated new ideas, technology, and cutting-edge innovation. It has fueled our talent pipeline and job growth. We know that creative thinking is ever more in demand across the economy, and we also know that creative practitioners are increasingly working and applying creative skills beyond the creative sector itself. QUT's Situated Creative Practice program responds directly to this important insight, and it places students of creative disciplines into interdisciplinary work contexts. This is an innovative, impactful program design. It gives students training in transferring their creative skills to different environments. It also strengthens relationships between the tertiary sector and industry, providing the basis for knowledge exchange. By studying this program in its pilot year, Creativity at Work provides timely insights into how we can better prepare our future creative professionals to play a key role in 21st century workplaces. The report will help educators and help their students hit the ground running after they graduate from their creative degrees. For the Australia Council, this is also critically important work, particularly in these times of great uncertainty about the immediate future. This uncertainty is felt keenly, of course, by young people and creative workers, two groups that are front and center of this research. Creativity at Work helps to identify the key capabilities that future creative professionals will bring to the recovery process. And importantly, the research also underscores the value creative professionals offer to industry, particularly as businesses work to adapt and respond to future disruptions. In order to realise the enormous potential of our cultural and creative industries, we need to address how we develop our creative workforce. Creativity at work will no doubt be highly instructive for many other educators within creative institutions across the country, particularly those that are embarking on their own journey with interdisciplinary learning. I would like to commend our collaborators at QUT for their vision in designing the Situated Creative Practice program, and thank Professor Stuart Cunningham and his team for their collegiality in co-producing this research. Thank you for listening, and I'll now hand back to Kristen.
Thanks, Adrian. It's now my pleasure to welcome Stuart Cunningham, Distinguished Emeritus Professor of Communication and Media Studies, Cultural Studies, Policy and Administration within the Faculty of Creative Industries at QUT. Thanks, Stuart.
Thank you, Kristen and Adrian, and welcome everyone to this very important webinar. What you're about to participate in is something pretty new, genuinely collaborative effort between Australia's leading arts agency, the Australia Council, and one of Australia's leading arts educators, QUT's Creative Industries. The fact is that both arts agencies and education programs face increasingly similar challenges. How do you prepare creative artists for a world of work that is shaped by digital threat and opportunity, casualisation of the workforce, the gig economy, swinging changes to consumption habits, and what counts as creative practice? COVID has swung a wrecking ball through anything in the creative industries that relies on people coming together in physical space while rewarding anything that can be produced and consumed online. How will creative practitioners shape their career pathways in the wake of COVID? This project will point you in some directions. Let me leave you as an introduction with two bits of research that also point the way and also point the challenge. The excellent research team that has put this together in collaboration with QUT, the research team at the Australia Council, reminded me last week that some research that they sponsored before COVID showed that 40% of artists surveyed received income from their practice that wasn't their main source of income. This shows how flexible creative artists in Australia have been in operating their portfolio careers. Also before COVID, our research at QUT on creative hotspots across regional Australia showed that creative practitioners benefited greatly from their connection to four key allied or complementary industries, industries that need the input of creative talent to do their work. These industries we identified, the leading industries we identified were tourism, education, social enterprise, and health. Creative careers are shaped as much by what happens outside the creative industries as inside them. But if that was before COVID, what now? So let's listen to what Creativity at Work can tell us about this. Back to you, Kristen.
Thank you, Stuart. I'd now like to hand over to two of my co-authors in this report, Dr. Gavin Sade and Greg Jenkins, to talk us through the Situated Creative Practice Study Program, which is the subject of the Creativity at Work report.
Gavin, I think
Gavin,
you may be on mute.
There? Or are you on mute?
Oh, sorry about that.
There you are.
Zoom fatigue, I'll blame that on. So I'm the Deputy Dean in the Faculty of Creative Industries, Education and Social Justice, and I'm going to provide just a little bit of a background to the curriculum development work that started in 2016 and led to this particular project. And then I'll hand over to Greg, my colleague, who is running the Situated Creative Practice curriculum this year in the School of Creative Practice. So I'll just share my screen and need to go on the slides. So the Bachelor of Fine Arts is the focus of this work, and the Faculty of Creative Industries was established at QUT in the early 2000s, 2001. The origins of this particular development is in 2016, when the faculty was looking at re-accrediting the curriculum for the Bachelor of Fine Arts for introduction in 2018, 2019. At the time, our approach to thinking about curriculum in the Bachelor of Fine Arts was really guided by sort of three key pieces of research. The first was research conducted by scholars like Stuart Cunningham, which really identified and recognised that many creative artists worked as embedded creatives across the economy and made a contribution far beyond just sort of the cultural production or creative services sector. The second was a series of focus groups that we ran with our current students, alumni, industry and community. And from those focus groups, we heard from many of our partners, our students and our graduates, that they felt our degrees prepared them with the disciplinary skills and the technical skills required to succeed. But they were looking for skills that were needed to work in interdisciplinary settings or authentic contexts more like those which modelled the work environment they were stepping into. Many of our graduates who were working in embedded roles were looking to see how we would include curriculum that prepared them to work in embedded contexts. And more recently, we'd run some alumni surveys of our graduates to identify their career paths. So we asked our graduates what jobs they'd held over 5 years from graduation. And I'll show you one snapshot of that, which really highlighted why we needed to look at this approach in the curriculum in the final year particularly. So this is using the creative Trident model, where we have occupations on the y-axis and industries on the x-axis. And the piece here to draw your attention to is 40% of our alumni surveyed from the Bachelor of Fine Arts indicated that at some point in their careers, they held an occupation that isn't classified as creative within either cultural production or creative services, and in a company that's outside the creative industries. About 12% of those were formerly working in education, but the rest were working in all sorts of roles. Now, the quip that some people make is, well, they're probably not working in meaningful jobs, they're working as baristas and in cafes, but that wasn't the case from when we looked at the data. What we did see was that many of them were working as managers or professionals in roles that required degrees. This particular survey also asked students about how relevant they felt their studies were to their current role. And of the graduates working outside the creative industries, 70 to 80% of them were saying that they found their studies very relevant to their roles, even though they weren't working within a creative field. So for us, this provided a background to the development. And we started looking at models for authentic interdisciplinary project-based units and curriculum, which partnered with external companies, communities, both within the creative sector and outside. Most of the examples we found ran at small scale, 40 students or so at the time. There was one large scale example which we drew some inspiration from. It was called Unit X at the Manchester School of Art, and they run that at up to about 1,000 students across 10 different majors in the School of Art. And it's an experience that occurs twice a year with students producing creative interventions that are shown across the city with external partners. We had quite a bit of experience within the creative industries of designing project-based work integrated learning in other programs, in our Bachelor of Creative Industries, in the Bachelor of Design, and in some of the communication programs. And we'd also been working with Ars Electronica on a small-scale academy or a lab where we brought students together from across disciplines to work on projects, which Greg was involved in. Now, the Bachelor of Fine Arts was established at QUT in 2001 with the formation of the Faculty of Creative Industries. Prior to that, all of the study areas were included in a more traditional Bachelor of Arts. It includes 9 study areas in a single degree structure. And when it was formed, the focus was really on a specialist program developing a disciplinary depth. Now, in 2016, at the same time we were thinking about our curriculum, we relocated all of the disciplines into a dedicated facility. Prior to that, they were scattered across a very large campus. So we had this opportunity to look at how we do things together across disciplines in a shared creative facility. The disciplines include acting, animation, creative writing, dance, drama, film and screen, music, technical production, visual arts. And this is a rough sketch of what the degree looks like. Students do 168 credit points. I'll show this in another diagram in a minute. In their first major, they can do a minor in another area from anywhere across the university. Situated creative practice, which is a 48 credit point component of a degree. Now that's roughly a semester of study or equivalent to a semester of study. And then there's some foundation units in first year. To give you a picture of what this looks like in terms of a volume of learning or how much time students dedicate to parts of their degree, because this is always a topical discussion when talking about curriculum and striking a balance between disciplinary depth and then the other types of experiences that we know are required to prepare students for their careers, especially the types we're looking at. Within the Bachelor of Fine Arts, the aqua-coloured units, we've called them study area A here, it's internal lingo for the major. There's 14 of those units which are taken across 3 years. In first year, there are 2 common units that all students come together to study in. And we surveyed students as part of this research coming out of KYB 102, Pathways to a Creative Career, to ask them about their expectations of their degree and their careers. We then came back and looked at the situated creative practice experience, which is in third year. It's the blue block, which is roughly half their studies in each semester. Now that's the real focus for this research. We spoke to students, industry partners, and academics involved in this piece of the curriculum. And so at this point, I'm going to hand over to Greg, who's going to talk about the situated creative practice experience and what it's really like on the ground for students. Thank you.
Thank you, Gavin. So in terms of what that actually looks like, I'll backtrack slightly. Gavin mentioned that we ran a program with the Ars Electronica facility in Austria, the Ars Electronica Future Lab. And I came on board that in 2017 with the brief to prove the concept that we could get creative practice students working together across disciplines in response to provocations or problems. And so in 2017, we assembled a team of students. It was essentially self-selecting. We put a call out and we accepted 10 students into this program from across disciplines of music, technical production, design, and dance primarily. And so they were all high-performing students that were very interested in this provocation of what is the sense of a human being in the future. We went through a period of a semester and a little bit of a development of that, that problem, essentially defining that problem and understanding how the different disciplines approaches could be brought to bear to a creative answer to that provocation. We went through a deliberate process of what we call discipline decontamination at first to put everyone on the same plane and to allow us to focus on the problem. And then we had, through a process of creative development, a way of being able to focus on that problem, but bring the individual students' discipline focus to that, so that we weren't leading with disciplinary ways of practice. We were leading with the concept, and then the disciplinary ways of working could be brought into bear after that. As we went through that, we developed these ideas into works in progress, which turned into a series of performance works. And as we went through, we realized there were particular areas of disciplinary expertise that we actually needed to bring in our academic colleagues into in sort of ad hoc support roles. So myself and my colleague, Dr. Steph Hutchinson, would work together with the students each week, assisting them with the development of the work. And as we realized that there were certain disciplinary areas that needed additional support, we'd bring in colleagues with that specialist area of knowledge. So this went through in September 2017. We took 3 performance and installation works to the Ars Electronica Festival that made use of the various disciplinary skills that we had to bear in design, in dance. We partnered with a local tech startup company to build tracking cameras to watch that. We built a sensorial playground, essentially, that housed a performance, but then a sense of play with that as well. So that was in 2017, and we proved that we could do this. 2018, the call was we need to scale up. So we increased the size of the academy to 35 students. We increased the diversity of the disciplines involved. We went through a similar process of provocation, creative developments. But what we found was with the size of that cohort, there was a real need to formalize production roles in addition to the creative roles. So with a larger cohort of 30 odd students, various students took on roles outside their own creative expertise into roles of production management. And that meant that we had a creative foundation there, but also one that could support as we moved into the production of these larger and more technologically ambitious performances and installations. So we were building equipment to create portable performances throughout the festival there, you'll see on the lower left, wearable technology presentations of future-focused aids for breathing and meditation. And then on the bottom right was a very ambitious project, which was looks like a small sort of home pod or something like that, but it was a large interactive performance in which this device had become sentient and booking people in to talk to this sentient device. So it was sort of like an interactive theatre performance. So these were quite big and complex projects, and it was made possible by the larger group and the greater diversity, but also the sense of structure that we had there in terms of production roles. Which brings us to 2019 and to situated creative practice. And the big challenge was scaling this up even further to manage 300 students across the final year of the Bachelor of Fine Arts from every one of our disciplines. So the first port of call was learning from the lessons of the Ars Electronica Academy, was to put out to the students a call for participation in various projects. So whereas previously it was optional who's interested in these projects and finding space within the curriculum to do this, this was now mainstreamed into the curriculum. And every third year fine arts student, in order to progress in their degree, needed to put in an expression of interest for one of a number of projects that were running. So once we did that, we had a look at the sort of distribution of disciplinary skills within each of those projects. And this diagram here is a lot of colors and squares, but I'll take you through it very briefly. What we're seeing here are the larger areas there. You can see projects, and then the smaller colored squares and rectangles in them are the disciplines within those projects. So you can see there's a bit of variation there. Some of the projects were reasonably homogeneous. So this was the film studio project, and the largest number of students in there are studying film and screen. But you'll also see that there are some additional students in there who have expressed interest in being part of that film studio. And they come from places like technical production, where there's rigging requirements. They come from visual arts, where there are requirements for art direction, which is not a skill that's taught directly in the film degree. We've also got drama students in there with their expertise in dealing with actors. And we've also got actors in there from our acting program as well. When you look at another project, this one here, Alone Together, it was a more ambiguous project. So the film studio was going to be making films. People understood that, and the film students felt that that was their calling by and large. Alone Together was a provocation around how do we understand and respond to what was at the time, we thought, the end of lockdowns in the end of 2020. And this particular group was pulled together from students who were interested in that concept, not in a particular form of media or outcome. And so you can see we had a much more diverse group there, and that allowed the forms and structures of the outcome to actually result from the transdisciplinary practices that resulted from that. In the previous example, the students from disciplines other than film were almost like embedded creatives in the film studio. So we were actually replicating that notion of a visual arts trained student as such, a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Visual Arts, coming to work in a film studio. Whereas this one here was more that transdisciplinary from the ground up. So that was calls for projects and getting students into the projects that they expressed the interest into. Then there was the question of what the learning framework would look like. And again, from our lessons in Ars Electronica, it was around being able to guide the development of a project and bringing multiple disciplines together. So we scheduled timetabled regular sessions each week where you would have multiple disciplines coming together, all focusing on the project. And the sort of things that would go on there would be creative development of the project, production management of the project, those kinds of things, focusing on the outcome. But we also recognized that we needed to continue to guide the mentorship of the students within their own home disciplines. So also there are weekly sessions where the disciplines come back together, come back to home base. So in these sessions, we have one discipline group and they all come from multiple projects. So we might have visual arts students in 5 or 6 different projects working with other disciplines, but once a week they do come back with all their visual arts peers and to discuss their processes so they can share examples of how they're applying the disciplinary skills. In addition to that, there are certain activities that cut across all disciplines and all projects. So things such as professional development modules, industry talks, guest speakers, unit level type things that I would run around how this all fits together into an assessment framework. And last but not least, of course, there is the students' own independent work and collaborative work, which is the bulk of the time they spend on this, developing, refining, working together to create the project outcome. Very briefly, the assessment plan here, the important things are that there are 2 types of assessment, 4 assessment items. The first assessment item that the students attend to is a professional plan where they look at how they can align their own creative and professional goals with the work going on in the project. Then it's into the project well and truly for assessment 2 and 3. First one there, assessment 2, is a progress report in terms of individually, what have they been working on the project, and then the project outcome at the end of the semester, which is assessed as a group of the entire project outcome. The final assessment item, the first time they do situated creative practice, they need to do a critical reflection of their experiences and align that with relevant literature. And when they come back for a second project, that final assessment item is instead a professional portfolio, which is an online published portfolio that communicates their experiences this time to a professional audience. So that's the essential pedagogical framework. In terms of what actually resulted from all of that, as you saw, we had some students who were essentially embedded creatives in certain projects, but other projects who had a mix of disciplines who didn't always have the right disciplines in there. So we set up a system whereby students in one project could collaborate with students in another project. So in this example, we have Vermilion Records, which was a record management label, but also a music producing house. They produce soundtracks for the films that are being made in Film Studio. Likewise, the actors from Live Performance Studio are working on the dramas that Film Studio is producing, and also animation is providing animated effects and things like that that go into the documentaries. It's not a one-way street, however, because then Film Studio, with its size, is then briefed to work with just about every other project to assist in documentation of their works, but also doing things like for Vermilion producing music videos, creativity in a time of climate change. It produced a short doco and integral elements of that. And Future Shop, it produced creative artifacts were then used in the final process. So we'd set up essentially a creative ecology here where students were collaborating interdisciplinary within the projects, but then the opportunity to collaborate between the projects and replicating that sort of approach that they're going to get once they get out into industry. Very quickly, some of the outcomes that recent outcomes we've had. I mentioned Future Shop. It was a collaboration with Intrapelli Shopping Centre, they were our industry partner, where students were devising installations that would promote mindfulness and engagement within the shopping centre environment. So calm, peaceful, meditative videos that would be displayed in various parts of the shopping centre. Symbiocene was a partnership with the Sanford Ecological Research Facility, a series of installations and performances that were conducted on site in the Sanford Environmental Research Facility, drawing attention and communicating the urgency of the climate crisis. Vermilion, I mentioned before, ran a special program partnering with local secondary schools where the students would provide songwriting mentorship, recording sessions, and artist development for those emerging musicians. The Amplifying a Publisher project partnered with Wombat Books, making book trailers, writing book reviews, and doing audience research reports. Scratch That, the local arts community, worked with Scratch That as a web magazine publication quarterly, curating a collection of visual arts, written work, and dramatic podcasts. And the final one that I'll mention is the Film Studio, one of the projects which signifies the adaptability of the program, which was during lockdowns at the start in the first half of 2020. The entire slate of documentaries that were planned could not go ahead. So instead, the students all worked from home and created a web series of 6 documentaries about experiences within that actual home environment. So we were able to take the framework, and because we were focusing on process, we were able to swap out the outcome with, you know, a considerable amount of replanning, but the students produced a wonderful corpus of work there. That's probably all from me. I think that gives a very comprehensive overview of the project. So I'll hand back to Kristen.
Thank you, Greg. I love those images, and it's really great to see the history of situated creative practice. Lena, could you please put up my slides? Thank you so much. So while Lena is getting the PowerPoint ready, I'll just kind of recap. As I mentioned earlier, I work in the research team at the Australia Council for the Arts, and I'm one of the co-authors on the Creativity at Work report, which studies everything that Greg just explained to us on the basis of that research that Gavin outlined. So this report was produced jointly by the Australia Council and QUT and provides an early assessment of some of the challenges and opportunities of this kind of interdisciplinary work integrated learning for students in the creative industries. And I say it's an early assessment because programs like QUT's Situated Creative Practice, they really are at the cutting edge of educational design for students in creative disciplines. Even while working on this project, I've had a number of conversations with lecturers, researchers, and educators across creative fields about the need for students of the arts and humanities more broadly to better understand the transferability of their creative skills to a variety of work settings. So I think there's a real growing understanding of the literature that Gavin and Greg have pointed to. And I think that demonstrates that the literature that Gavin and Greg pointed to demonstrates the increasing value of creativity across the economy. And the fact that many future creatives will be working across a variety of sectors, right? Applying their specific disciplinary skills to different industry contexts. So all this is to say that the Situated Creative Practice program is really important, groundbreaking work. And we were thrilled to have the chance to study it in collaboration with our QUT colleagues in its pilot phase. So next slide, thank you, Lena. This report that we're launching today presents the findings of this joint research project by the Australia Council and QUT, one that investigated the role and the value of this interdisciplinary work integrated learning for creative industry students. So our case study, of course, was the Situated Creative Practice program and the projects that are run within that you've just seen from Greg's presentation. We studied this between 2019 to 20 while the program was being piloted, but the program has continued since then, is now embedded as a capstone unit of QUT's Bachelor of Fine Arts degree. The overall purpose of our research was to better understand the evolving professional and community contexts for creativity, and of course, how to best prepare graduates for work in these evolving contexts, whether they be in the creative industries or other, I guess, what we might call non-creative sectors. We wanted to understand how we can best equip graduates of creative disciplines to embark on their professional pathways after graduation, and then how they can contribute to the workplaces of the future. Thanks, Lena. Next slide. For us at the Australia Council, this work sits within a suite of our research focused on the future of arts and creativity. This body of work investigates the ways and places that creativity is being deployed and valued, both within and beyond the arts and cultural sector. Our work in this area also keeps an eye on the changing role of creativity in an evolving society and the ways in which the arts manages industrial, social, and environmental disruption, such as that we're in right now. And of course, the Australia Council has an ongoing interest in new areas of employment for artists and the educational support that's required for creatives to thrive. So research partnerships such as this one with QUT play a really vital role in providing critical intelligence to the sector on all these topics. Our work with universities such as QUT also provides a basis for knowledge sharing and the creation of meaningful partnerships between the tertiary sector and industry. So such partnerships can, I guess, as we see in this report, Creativity at Work, also provide the basis for supporting students of creative disciplines to find their feet post-graduation. Thanks, Lena. Next slide. We conducted this research between August 2019 and June 2020, and we focused on 7 situated creative practice projects as case studies. Data was collected from student assessments and from surveys and through 20 semi-structured interviews with the students, academics, and industry partners. The research sought to understand the value of participation in situated creative practice for students, staff, and industry partners. Also the challenges as well as successes of the pilot program, and both the industry and student expectations regarding preparation for work in the creative industries. In first semester 2020, restrictions associated with COVID-19, of course, moved situated creative practice online. But this was interesting because it meant the program was tested under the very kinds of disruptive conditions it was designed to anticipate. As things turned out, it responded to these conditions extremely well. But I'll get onto that as I move through the findings of our research, which begins with the next slide. Thanks, Lena. So some key findings. Firstly, the situated creative practice pilot developed meaningful partnerships between the university and industry and produced really strong external advocates for the program. So this finding relates to the point I just made about the importance of linking the tertiary sector to industry contexts and ensuring that students are given opportunities to learn on the job. The fact that the program has developed these relationships between the university and industry is really important for the students and for ensuring that curricula such as situated creative practice can continue to respond to the ever-evolving exigencies of the industry. Another finding was that while the development of deep art form knowledge and creative skills remains critical, interdisciplinary work integrated learning was beneficial for both students and industry partners. So this was an important finding since it utterly underscores the importance of the program's interdisciplinarity. However, it also emphasizes the importance of core disciplinary skills, those specialist art form skills. Artists need time to develop their practice. They need to invest in their craft. At the same time, they also need an understanding of how those specific disciplinary skills can be applied within other contexts. In other words, we need to invest in both. Another finding was that students of situated creative practice developed valuable networking and collaboration skills, and industry partners really commented on how they benefited from the creative skills and fresh ideas brought by students to the workplace. Final slide. Thanks, Lena. However, there is still a need to better communicate the value of interdisciplinary learning for students of creative industries, both to staff and students. So interestingly, one of the challenges of the program was managing students' expectations of their time at university and also of their future careers alongside the realities of professional creative practice. Another challenge was addressing some concerns among university staff regarding the ability to maintain a specialised art form focus within the program. Interestingly though, students and staff with recent experience in the creative sector were more likely to value and then advocate for the program, which is telling, I think, and points to the relevance of the program to contemporary industry contexts. Also interesting was the fact that industry partners really repeated that growing body of literature when they described what they wanted from recent graduates. Industry partners pointed to the same 21st century job skills that are described in the academic research, like creative and social skills. This is what they want from graduates. They want transferable skills, emotional intelligence, cross-cultural skills, and an openness to lifelong learning. So In a way, industry knows what it needs. And where there is still some work to be done, it seems, is in the identification of these skills within creative graduates, and then in developing a language that can help connect the creative and the educational sectors to those industry needs. I mentioned COVID-19 earlier and its impact on this pilot program. As a result of the pandemic, the program rapidly moved online in first semester 2020 and continued to reimagine project outcomes as the year progressed. Greg mentioned some examples of how that online pivot, excuse the term, occurred. But in each case, students, staff, and industry partners were able to adapt because of a focus on the process of interdisciplinary collaboration. It was the process that was at the center, not a fixation on a particular predetermined outcome. So in this way, the crisis of COVID-19 accentuated the importance of the kinds of capabilities that this pilot had set out to develop. The pandemic has forced the question of how we might make the cultural and creative industries more resilient. It's also made this report, Creativity at Work, all the more relevant, highlighting the need for lateral and adaptive approaches in preparing for creative careers. So, last point, this might be early work, but it's hugely important in beginning a longer process of preparing artists for all kinds of social, economic, and technological change. And of course, ensuring that artists play a key role in shaping the ways in which that change plays out. Thanks, Lena. That's it for my slides. So we now have time for questions. I think we'll leave at least 10 minutes for these. Please feel free to add these into the chat. I see there are a few already. So I'll start at the top for now. And this, I think, might be one for Gavin. So you had, hello.
Yes,
you had a stat in your, oh, sorry, Gavin.
Yes, I'm here.
Did you? Yeah, good. Okay.
Oh, I was just going to jump in.
Okay. You had a stat about the number of graduates who are doing work in non-creative industries. I think that was the box in the bottom right-hand corner. Yep. Do you have some examples of graduates who are doing that kind of work, applying their skills in other sectors? And I guess you did talk about some of them ending up in managerial roles. Perhaps you could elaborate on what those sectors were.
Yeah, so maybe just a quick scan. I've had a quick look back at the data, and we've got graduates in roles, customer relations manager in a large design firm, which is still inside the creative services, a digital health officer at Queensland Health. We had quite a few graduates who are working in roles in consulting firms. So they were roles like insight analyst or some generally just consultants. A number working as operations coordinators. The one I've made a note here was working as the operations coordinator at the Gabba, a large arena in Brisbane. Quite a number of our graduates work as sort of project officers or program managers across an array of sectors, but there is a notable percentage who are working in places like the Mater Foundation or Headspace and companies that are community focused, not-for-profit or foundations. We have some graduates who are working not in formal education. So many of our graduates, I mentioned a 12% who go on to work in education. There's a smaller group who go on to do postgraduate qualifications in education and teach in schools. But there's a much larger group who are working in roles that are informal education. Now, whether that is running informal education programs with organisations like Headspace or attached to public programming activities of a large venue, a museum or a gallery, or working in informal dance school, education in dance schools or visual arts schools that they set up or run themselves. One of the other really interesting insights from our graduate surveys has been that of any of our degrees, the graduates from the Bachelor of Fine Arts reported the highest percentage that they have started their own creative enterprise. So probably 40% of our graduates coming out of the Bachelor of Fine Arts are reporting that they've started a business or running some sort of creative enterprise that they manage themselves. So that we think sort of that in combination with working as an embedded or in other fields suggests that there's a whole pile of other capabilities that are probably really useful to include in our program.
Here's another one that starts with Gavin, but it's possible that Greg and Gavin, you could both answer this. So how have changes in the sector impacted your findings is the question. So changes in both the creative fields and higher education, but perhaps you could also speak to how these changes recently might have impacted upon the Situated Creative Practice program.
So if we're talking about either, probably COVID's the biggest change that's had an impact on our thinking. And going into COVID as a faculty where we've got a lot of students who are looking anxiously at what their futures are going to be like in a very transformed world, we did take the time to see the value of creative arts and creative industries and the role that people who have these types of capabilities are playing in helping society navigate what it means to go through a pandemic in the way we have. It was also really notable that through lockdown and even now, we turn to the creative industries. We read, we view creative content. And so we looked at finding examples of our alumni who had, to use that horrible phrase, pivoted to online to find new ways to reach audiences and to bring meaning to their lives where they couldn't get to live venues and events. I regularly told a couple of anecdotes. One about one of our PhD students was the director of Camerata, the Queensland Chamber Orchestra. And during the lockdowns last year, they reached an audience of 450,000 people around the world on Facebook, where their KPI at QPAC is 25,000. We have one of our alumni who runs a performing arts company who very quickly started broadcasting a variety show from our lounge rooms every Friday night, who picked up opportunities out of that. So we tried to focus on ways that creative artists and people in the creative industries could still see opportunities to reach an audience and could bring meaning, help people understand what was happening. So I think for us, it was really to come back to what do we do in the creative industry and the creative arts that is of value, and how do we continue to communicate and engage with society and help bring meaning to what's happening.
Yep. I'll just add to that one, Gavin. In terms of the outcomes, I mentioned already that our film studio was able to make that change to the online way, but there were many others. The performance studio did Zoom performances of plays, and instead of live performances, we were able to do websites with performative installations on them. But I think for me, the thing that stands out in terms of these big shifts and how this program was able to deal with them was the ability that I was able to get amongst my colleagues to collaborate together. So when the first lockdown started in the beginning of 2020, we'd already had 12 months of working in situated creative practice. And the collaborative network that I'd built up amongst my academic colleagues meant that we were able to support each other in that enormous shift, which meant that we could support the students better. So there's a big kind of cultural shift that's happened there in terms of the way we as academic staff work together. And that's been a significant change.
Yeah, great. And I guess I would just add, it's really a repetition of my final point in my presentation. The research was largely done before COVID impacted the program, but the findings, I suppose, have been impacted in the sense that the broader context for those findings, it's reiterated the importance of developing the kinds of capacities in students that will enable them to troubleshoot and to face unexpected conditions with creative and critical thinking. So I think it's kind of underscored the value of the report and of the research of the program. Okay, we have a question from Katya. Did you, and I think this is again for Gavin and Greg, did you get feedback from industry partners? Or there's some of this in the research, but I'll leave it to you first, right? So did you get feedback from industry partners about how well prepared students were for this kind of external work? And if so, did this vary according to their discipline? That is to say, were there some disciplines who were better prepared for this work than others? It's an interesting question.
Did you want to take that one, Greg? You might have some more recent interactions with the partners this year, for example.
Sure. I think that often it was the partners who were the ones that weren't quite prepared and trying to get the students to work with those partners. We did have situations where partners were not sure how these students could be useful. Once the students were actually able to pitch ideas to them, then that worked well. So that was something that was a little unexpected. But in terms of feedback from the partners, I think that the tension there between disciplinary skills and interdisciplinary capabilities is always going to be there. I think that that's something that came out in terms of partners' levels of expectations in some instances about how much a student would be able to do, or what the level of expertise of a student is. You know, we did have some partners who had very unrealistic expectations of what would constitute being ready to engage in this work in terms of experience that simply outstripped 3 years of a Bachelor of Fine Arts. So I think that there was that, but overwhelmingly the feedback that we did get was that the ability for students to suggest and to bring new ideas was the most valuable thing. And that if that really overrode any of the concerns that the industry may have had about preparedness. In most of these instances, the students weren't in an internship arrangement. They weren't working in a work placement as such. They're working independently and liaising with the industry partner as well. So that is a little bit different in that situation. Gavin, is there anything you want to add to that one?
I think it might be that question around which discipline. And from what I've seen through the project, there isn't any particular discipline that was more better prepared or less prepared to engage in situated creative practice or work with our partners. We did see a little bit that a student's level of maturity and confidence in their discipline was beneficial when they're working in these sort of settings. But it wasn't necessarily something that we'd say correlates. But in the main, it's been most of our industry partners, once we establish a framework for engagement, because we can't just hand students to partners, we really put a lot of thought into the way our students and our partners interact within the curriculum. So it's that structured framework and the scaffolding, how we support our students and partners through this, which really makes the difference and makes a successful experience over one that isn't. You sort of have to put careful thought into that framework, and ensuring that partners understand and have a set of expectations and know how to work with our students is equally important.
Okay, thank you. Okay, here's another question from an anonymous attendee. Can you say a little more about the concerns that some people had about the impact that this program might have on specialty art form training? What does interdisciplinary learning mean for disciplinary learning? I'm also happy to add, you two go first.
Okay. For anyone who works in a university, it's always the volume of learning in a course is always contested. So whenever we're talking about curriculum and curriculum change, there's always a debate about this balance between disciplinary depth and other curriculum. And when we looked at situated creative practice initially, we weren't just looking at something that was a teaching efficiency. We were actually grounding the work in research and ensuring that we were providing an experience that better prepared our graduates for the future. And for us, that was the focus. It wasn't about efficiencies or anything along those lines. We also saw that situated creative practice wasn't intended to erode a disciplinary depth. It was a different way for students to develop their disciplinary skills through application in what we saw were more authentic contexts. So working in teams that more closely modeled the types of experiences they might have outside, or contexts that more closely modeled the types of contexts they'd work in, we felt was a way to demonstrate the application of disciplinary skills and develop those. And so you saw Greg talk about the movement between the project and back to the disciplinary home and the mentoring. We've really just shifted the way we think about that final year experience and the development of disciplinary skills.
Just nods, Greg. Yeah, I guess, yeah. And I would
Pretty
just
much,
again, reiterate that that's a really important finding of the research, is that you need to invest in both. You need to invest in the development of those specialist disciplinary skills in order to be able to apply them elsewhere. And the whole creative economy, kind of the talent pool that feeds into the creative economy has been developed in those areas of specialty art form training, often through public funding for the arts. So that relationship is really important, but you can't have the creative industries and its economy and the transferability of creative skills without that first investment in the studio practice. How are we going? I think we might have time for one more question. We'll see. Thank you, Stuart, for answering Lisa Colley's question offline. Here's an interesting one. So a question from Karen. How is the visibility and the value of creativity being seen with artists working in these many roles by the community at large? And I wonder if we can answer that one. How does the community see and value artists working in these many different roles? It's a tricky one.
I'll have a stab at it.
And so will I after you, Greg.
Okay. I think that in specific examples, so I'll go back to film studio again, doing documentaries on local community issues. I think that there's a recognition there of a community that would otherwise not have happened. So I think that I see it in those sorts of things with the outcomes. I see it in outcomes when we're working with children in creative arts-based workshops. So one of the projects I didn't mention was designing play and arts-based workshops for children, for very young children. So that's all pre-COVID, of course, at the Brisbane Powerhouse. And so you'd have children, the age group was under 2 or 3 years old, coming and engaging in arts-based play in a creative venue. So you'd see it in those sorts of instances, and you'd see it in the people wanting to come and be involved in that. I think beyond that, yes, it is a little bit tricky to gauge.
Although, and I'll kind of use this as a way to wrap up today, this is precisely why we have the research function at the Australia Council, and why research into the value of arts and culture is so important, is to build the evidence base. And a large part of that research is to track the contributions of arts and creativity, whether it's across society or across different economies. And so it's through that work that we can demonstrate these impacts that creativity has broadly on society, culture, and the economy. So that's an ongoing project, is building that evidence base. And it's precisely within that project that we've launched Creativity at Work today. So I would like to thank all of our speakers one last time for their contributions. Gavin, Greg, thanks of course to Adrian and Stuart for helping launch the report as well. Thanks to Elisa and Bettina for your Auslan translation, amazing. And thanks to Diego and Lena for holding it all up in the background. Creativity at Work is, of course, on the Australia Council website. We hope you enjoy the report and find it useful. And that's it for today. Thanks to everyone for joining. Bye for now.